All right, welcome to another edition of A Trip to the Capital, where we bring you up to date information on what is happening in Nigeria, where the decision is being made. Every time you sleep and wake up, there are a group of people that gather. Where, if I'm being biblical now, I'll say they neither sleep nor slumber, but they do. Just that even when they're sleeping, they're thinking about events that are happening in Nigeria. Some will say for good, others will say for bad. But either way, it affects you. So we're here again in Abuja on this episode of A Trip to the Capital, and we want to talk about the tax. The tax reform, the four components of it came into effect last year. We had 6 months to implementation. Towards the end of that implementation process, the sensitization rather, um, hell was let loose. A lot of people started bringing out different aspects of the law that existed and were ignored by the average person before, or those that didn't exist. It almost became, well, do I say, a war of words? Truth and untruth, misinformation, disinformation, and the actual information. So today, we're at the office of the chairman for the committee on, and I hope I'm going to get this right the first time. I always mix it up. Tax reform and policy. Okay, no, how do I put it now? Tax reform and you know what?
Fiscal policy.
Fiscal policy committee. Yes, I needed help there. The fiscal just wasn't coming. But that is where we are today. Taiwo Oyedele, the man who's been in the news for about 2 years, consistently talking about taxes and the benefits that come with it. Let's get into the show. A trip to the capital. So, Taiwo Oyedele, good day and welcome to the show.
Good day to you. Thank you for coming.
All right, thank you for having us as well. And we're talking tax, and but before we even get into tax, at the early years of your emergence in the office, there was a statement that you made about the petroleum sector and the fact that I might not put it perfectly verbatim, but it had to do with the risk of getting our refineries to work. You've heard a lot about that quote. And you've been quoted to say we should not allow our refineries work.
Yes, I think maybe to put it in proper context is not not allowing it to work. Is that the reality of what we have with our refineries is that those refineries cannot operate efficiently. What do I mean by that? In any business, you want to incur cost of 100 naira to produce output that is worth more than 100 naira. So if I spend 100 naira to produce bread, I want to sell the bread for like 120 naira so I can make 20 naira profit. But we have refineries that have been badly managed, or put differently, grossly mismanaged. Apart from the money we keep spending on turnaround, on maintenance, even when they're working, you put in crude worth a certain amount, let's say $100. You work on it to refine it, and the refined product is worth less than $100. That was where my point came from. Like, each time the refinery is working, let me put it this way: when the refinery is not working, we're losing money because we're using money to maintain it. We're paying the salary of people who produce nothing, right? When the refinery is working, we lose even more money
Hmm.
because the product is being destroyed when it goes through that process. And this was something that the former group CEO of the NNPC said at the National Assembly. More recently, the current CEO of the NNPC Limited also said the same thing. So you're going to say to yourself, at what point would we stop deceiving ourselves? If we had given the refineries out for free, we just dashed someone that has the ability to run refineries, would have saved nearly $20 billion over the past 10, 15 years. This is a country where primary schools, roads from farm to market, health centers, these are very basic things we can't provide. Even sanitation. The day I heard that There's a market in the north where women don't take water. And the reason why they don't drink water, guess what? Because they're asked to pay to use the toilet. I don't know whether it's 15 naira. Look at that level of wickedness.
So they don't want to take water.
So they don't have to use the toilet because they don't have the money to pay to use the toilet. A country that you can't even provide sanitation for your most vulnerable people, you waste over $20 billion because you keep insisting that you have to refine and it has to be government refinery. Where is it? Why is it that we no longer have just only government-owned banks? Why didn't we insist that we must retain Nitel and tell MTN and Glo to go to hell and see whether Nigeria will be at this point today? You need to be honest with yourself. We should stop all these, trying to be populist, so crowd pleasing commentary and analysis is not helping us. So that comment in a nutshell was my way of saying, let's be honest with ourselves. We cannot run refineries efficiently. Let's sell it and let private sector run with it.
Right. So it's not necessarily about the state of the refinery. It's about the sincerity of those who are running it and the competence.
It's both. If you have a refinery that is run by private sector, so the private sector will think every time whether they are making more than they are spending. Because if they do not make up to the amount they are spending, that business in accounting we say has a going concern problem because very soon it will pack up. Yeah. So the private sector is designed naturally to think about efficiency because that's the only way to survive. But in the public sector, you can be the head of that refinery, produces nothing, brings in crude of $1 billion, produces less than that in refined value, and you still keep, in fact, you may even get promoted because the incentives, the reward system, and key performance indicators in the public sector is upside down when it comes to efficiency. It really doesn't focus on efficiency. So sometimes even the people that are appointed are not the most competent people, right? So those are the issues. So, and it's not only the refinery. The refinery is like the number one where we waste a lot of money. My view personally is that all government assets and all government businesses should be reassessed. If you have a government entity or government business that is mostly for social services, try and do that as efficiently as possible. Every other thing that is not social services, give it to the private sector.
So you're talking about privatizing or just management contracts?
It's whatever works, think about NLNG. Do you know how much billions of dollars Nigeria has made from Nigeria LNG? Nigeria LNG, since they started in the 90s, I think late 1990 or something, Nigeria has made more than $30 billion. NLNG is a tiny percentage of NNPC. So in NLNG, the federal government owns, I think, 49%. Private sector owns 51%. Are we not better off as a country that NLNG, and by the way, NLNG is being run by Nigerians. The CEO, the board, they are Nigerians. So it's not like Nigerians are terrible people, right? But you won't go to NLNG and see someone there who is incompetent that has been appointed to be CEO. No, you won't find. So you run it well, and therefore we benefit. There's a concept that many Nigerians don't understand. When they think about running government, they think about how they run their families, and they're totally different. I'll give you one example. If you own a car or you own a house and you sell it, you actually lose it. The only thing you get is the money from selling it, and that asset is gone. When you're government, you sell an asset and you still keep it. How does it work? The value of any asset is the money you make from the assets or the money that the asset saves you from spending. So in accounting, we call it the present value of future cash flows. So let me use a simple example. If I have a car that I use for Uber, you know, or Bolt or whatever it is, car hailing services. So every day or every month, I spend 1 million naira maintaining it, buying fuel, and I make 1.5 million. That's 500,000 extra, is what makes that asset worthwhile. If I sell it as an individual, I lose that. If I sell it as the government, I continue to collect money from the asset that I have sold. It's called taxes. So when NLNG does well, they pay billions of dollars in taxes. Even telcos, government sold the license, right? It used to be Nitel. Well, how much money, how much tax did we collect from Nitel? Nitel was not even breaking even. Now you allow private sector to do telecommunication. See the money they make from only MTN alone. So you sell and you still keep the asset. So this whole sentiment and attachment to they want to sell assets, so we must not allow it to happen. No.
So, okay, before we get into the crux of tax this year, so are you recommending that we sell shares or we liquidate completely to private sector?
No, I think that's why I said it depends. So if you take an asset, if you take the refinery, for the refinery, government should sell controlling interest to the private sector, similar to the NLNG model. So government is still a shareholder, but the private sector is running the show. And then it's profitable, so which means we don't need to budget for it anymore. So first, you stop the bleeding, and then they make money and they pay taxes, and then they give Nigeria dividend. Because it's working, they hire more people. Before you know, you just have this ripple effect that is positive on the economy, right? If you take we have stadia. Take one national stadium. So some of them you drive past and you want to close your eyes. It's painful to know that in a country where people love sports so much, we can't even develop a stadium to be like a sports city where you have complementing activities there, you maintain it. Look at the size of EPL alone in the UK. Tens of billions of pounds sterling in economic value, right? So that's a model where, for example, to be honest, just sell the stadia to people who can manage them. So the model that government would adopt would depend on the asset they are looking at, but one objective should be head constants, efficiency, stop wasting money that you don't actually have, and let it create value for the Nigerian people. That's what is important.
Okay, so with that out of the way, let's come to tax. Nigerians have heard you on that, and let's see how many Nigerians will agree with you on that. But it's a viable proposition that you're giving. But let's look at tax right now. The tax law came into effect on the 1st of January. It's been a few weeks into it. There are many components of the tax that include automation and digital influence and all that. How far gone are we with implementation? Is it fully implemented or what level are we?
To be honest, I don't think there's even any law that is ever fully implemented because it continues to live. Yeah, it's a living document. So every year you make money, you need to implement the law by filing returns, following the rules. But broadly, there were so many changes introduced by the new tax reform laws, which means we didn't do this before. Now we need to do them. Do we have the systems in place? One of it is electronic invoicing. So under the new system, you have to do electronic invoicing. The Nigeria Revenue Service has categorized companies into three. Those that are 5 billion naira annual turnover or more are already um, onboarded. So which means the system has been built. Those between 1 to 5, I think they are in phase 2, and those below 1 billion a year are in the final phase 3. We also have, some provisions of the new law where new institutions were set up. were to be set up, like the office of the tax ombud. We never had that before. So Mr. President has appointed the ombud. That's implementation. The ombud has a small office. That's part of implementation. But the ombud is meant to be in at least 6 geopolitical zones physically to start off. Over time, must be present in every state, right? I don't know how soon we'll be able to get there because that requires a lot of resources, and money is usually not in abundance, so it's limited. So you have that also progressing. You have the taxation of informal sector. For many years, we're sold the wrong story that our money is in the informal sector. If you can just tax them, you'll be rich. Like how do you become rich by taxing poverty? It doesn't add up.
But we're told that that's where the engine room of the micro is.
Yes, I think the NG room, I would agree. If you have 30 million of your people doing nano, micro, small businesses, just trying to survive, it just makes logical sense that if you support them, you support the whole of the economy, right? I'm not saying any sector is not very important, but there's some sectors that when they're doing well, the people that are benefiting are less than 1,000. When you fix MSMEs and the informal sector, you actually help the whole, you not only help the whole country, you help your middle to low cadre of society, including people who struggle every day. They wake up in the morning. There was a session we had previously at the State House, was even the previous governor. The VP was saying that a woman was selling pomo. Some people know what pomo is. So the whole inventory of what she was selling on the tray on her head, if you bought everything, maybe it would be like 5,000 naira. And you still have to take out the cost of the inventory of the items. So after spending time roaming around in the sun, shouting "Era for more," you end up at the end of the day with 1,000 naira. So you find what we should be using that 1,000 for is to feed the kids, to buy pencil and eraser so they can go to school. Nothing extraordinary, nothing luxurious. And then you now say that person should pay tax. How are we able to do that and go back to sleep at night? In a decent society, those are people you support every single month with conditional cash transfer. So we've done that for far too long, and it's time to stop. Because data also shows that even people at the top are not paying, they're not paying their fair share.
Okay.
So we think that the formula for the informal sector is to use data to identify, because there are some people in the informal sector, they make more money than CEOs of banks. But the problem with us is when we make policies, we use the example of one person that is making billions to make policy for everybody, including those that can't make 1 million naira in a year. So this time around, our policy says bottom 97% have no capacity to pay. Let's officially exempt them from taxes.
That's 97% of companies.
Of businesses. Yes, of businesses. And then the remaining 3% that have the capacity to pay, let's make their taxes progressive and let's ensure that nobody is above the law. That's the right thing to do. We should have done that like 50 years ago.
Okay, let's take this one after the other. You spoke about the fact that the average person who's selling with a tray on the street should not be taxed because they don't even have the inventory. How much tax can you collect from it? But a lot of times you realize that these taxes are mostly collected by local governments and state governments. I was somewhere in Alaba a while ago, about 2 years ago, and I saw this lady selling, I think it was, I can't remember if it was pure water. And I saw this guy run up to her, harassing her to pay taxes. And she had to stop and pay a certain amount, or did she issue a ticket or something like that? You are not in charge of these taxes, but you've put a law saying let's exempt these ones from taxation. How are you implementing that?
That's a good question. So, on one hand, that woman or man or young person or old person who is being asked to pay whatever tax by whatever name really doesn't care whether it's local government
Oh, yes.
or state or federal. They just know government is making their life impossible. So that was the approach we adopted to say, let's solve this problem for everyone. But we also recognize that we have limits and we have limitations. If the constitution empowers the local government to collect a tax, like radio levy, TV levy, produce tax, bicycle tax, wheelbarrow tax, are in the constitution. Like, how do you collect wheelbarrow tax and you feel good? So we knew that we couldn't just solve that by enacting new tax laws. But there were those we could, like the personal income tax that they asked them to pay. They call it different names. Everybody who is selling tomato pay 10K, pay 15K. Those ones were laws enacted at the national level. So we try to harmonize those ones, create threshold for exemption, and that's already in the new law and is being implemented. But there's the other leg of local government taxes. That's where the most of it is. So we've done two things. So one, we have drafted a law along with the Joint Revenue Board, and we've sent to the state to enact for themselves. Because the Supreme Court says you can't dictate to them, they're the ones to enact the law for themselves. Second thing we have done is we've written to the National Assembly, proposed amendments to the Constitution to take out these nuisance taxes. And that progress is moving well. We are grateful to the lawmakers. We're grateful also to the governors. As of last week, when we had a meeting with NEC, National Economic Council, about 12 states have already enacted, 13 have it in their houses of assembly. So really, to be honest, we need to recognize when we're making progress. So if this progress is sustained, back to the question you asked previously, this implementation is an ongoing process. If the progress is sustained, we'll get to a point where all of these things will be a thing of the past. We are in a hurry. We can't wait for this to happen like yesterday.
All right. And when you look at this, so what you're saying is that very soon, a lot more states will have implemented this law and exempt the basic, what you could call needless taxes that are taken from those petty traders and hawkers on the streets. But then they will come back to you with one question. How then will they make money? Because those taxes are sources of income for them.
So if you're cutting it off,
Where will they make money?
where would they make money from?
The reason I laugh is I think we all know where the problem is. And the problem is the elephant in the room that sometimes we don't want to address. In 20, I'm going to tell you because people know me, I'm not the one who hides the elephant in the room. In 2023, no, maybe 2024. Yeah, 2024. We are waiting for 2025 numbers. In 2024, all the local governments in Nigeria, all 774, did not collect up to 100 billion naira. That's what they reported. All of them, 100 billion naira. They did not collect. How is it that from people trying to sell pure water on the street to the woman in the market trying to sew, torn cloth to the vulcanizer hoping that your tires will lose pressure so you can make 500, all those people that you are taxing is less than 100 billion for a whole year? Maybe we should exempt all of them because 100 billion makes little or no impact on a country where your budget, the state and federal government for this year, their budget is 93 trillion naira. If you remove 100 billion, it's still 93 trillion. So the elephant in the room is that this is not about making money for the government because that money is small. It's a drop in the ocean. It's people are making money for themselves. So you put this pain on the vulnerable people, extract money from them, and it doesn't get to the government because there's a lot of leakages and corruption in the process. We heard about different, levels of government where they even outsource. So you sell your tax. So you go meet someone and say, give me 50 million naira.
Oh, yes.
And you can now collect this tax for the whole year. And the person just goes haywire, printing receipts as they go along. So the reality is that, and this is supported by data, even in places where this has been done in Nigeria, Kaduna, Ondo, Enugu, a few places where they've tried it. What would happen is that the amount that government collects after the reform will go up by more than 10 times. But the amount that people made for themselves will disappear. That's where the fight is usually coming from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all the boys in the hood, all the money they make, you're doing away with
And the principals that send them to be there.
Mm.
They're not there on their own. You have powerful interest behind those things. Some of it is political settlement, but politicians will find something else to do, not create pain and burden for the people just to satisfy themselves. I feel like we're living in the days of Mongo Park sometimes. Because you see, even smaller countries in Africa, nobody does these things anymore. You won't drive in Ghana and see people harassing you. They remove the side mirror. Yeah, like it's so.
Tank cover.
You remove tank copper. If you're selling something, they can take some of the items. And there was one I read, and they said it was Yaba in Lagos. The woman just got there with this machine, sewing machine, that you carry on your shoulder. Put it now. Was hoping to find customer. Had no money. Trekked to that place. And they said pay 400. And the mama said, maybe if you come back, I haven't found any customer. If you come back in the evening, maybe I would have sold. And then they took the head of the machine. And the old woman was now running and crying. Like, that's so insane, right? We shouldn't do that again. So there is no way to justify putting the burden on your most vulnerable citizens because, in quotes, you want to raise revenue. The whole essence of the revenue is to take care of the people, right? So which means it's a contradiction to take from people you're supposed to help so that you can help them. Like, I don't understand it. Go and take from the people that have and leave these poor people alone.
And you spoke about personal income tax. And how does the law address the anomaly in personal income tax? I know of someone who was taught by road safety, and they insisted, that's FRSC, and they insisted he must go to their office. So he said, okay, let's go. He said he had worn out tires, and the fine, I think, is around 2,000, but they dragged him to the office. Upon getting to the office, of course, the tax men are there. They said to check his tax, and he's so confident. He works in a company. Check. And they come out and say, you're 3 months short. He says, no, he's deducted from my account every month. And they insist he must pay on the spot tax that has already been deducted. So the question is, how do you ensure that companies who deduct taxes, PIT, from their employees, yet they don't remit? There are even those that say some companies will not remit the taxes, and when you complain, maybe you resign, you get another job, they pay your part and they don't pay their part. What does this law address that in any way?
Excellent question. Yeah. So these new tax laws are trying to make us more transparent and more accountable. So this transparency and accountability is not only from the government side. That's why I like this your question. You work for a company, by law, they're supposed to contribute to your pension so they can save towards your tomorrow. They're supposed to pay your personal income tax, PAYE. They're not doing you a favor, they've deducted it from your pay. Now they have not remitted, and you're not able to find out. Under this new tax law, it has created the transparency framework. That's one of the reasons why we had to remind people that under this law, even when you're exempted from paying tax, you must still file returns. So the way the system is designed to work is that every time you log into your account to file returns, if you cannot log into your account, you go to the tax office, they will help you. You will see what they have remitted on your behalf. So if your employer has been deducting your PAYE and they never remitted, you find out from there, right? Same thing with even pension. Those who have the time to find out, you can even activate SMS notification every time they contribute. They send you a message. So people have to also take interest. But the framework has been provided for transparency so that you know where the problem is coming from. If you deduct my tax, you don't pay it, I find out, I'll come and ask you. If you can't explain it properly or you feel like I can do nothing, I will escalate it. There's a process here as well to escalate. You can do to the tax ombud that can help you, or you can whistleblow to the revenue service where they're supposed to pay the money to. But before you do that, please clarify with your employer first. Maybe they have a cash flow problem, maybe it's a temporary problem, maybe it's a reconciliation problem, maybe it's a tax authority system that has not picked it. But I think we all have to play our part.
All right. And talking about playing your part, in a Nigeria where a lot of people who have jobs are holding on to it, the concern is if I confront my employers, what if they tell me, wow, your wallet is too much? We don't need your services anymore. How do we protect such a person?
So this is where I would do it. Let's even say I'm a junior worker and I work in a company where they really don't care about the employees. If you mess up, they sack you, find someone else, right? And they have deducted 5,000 naira from me, tax, and I find it's not in my tax account. So what I would do is to go to HR or the payroll manager or whoever is in charge of that to say, in my pay slip for last month, look at the 5,000 was deducted. I checked my account with the tax authority, the 5,000 naira is not there. I just want to be sure that these tax people are not the one who are refusing to reflect it. Maybe it's also a reconciliation issue. Are you able to explain? Questions are so powerful. In fact, there was a session we had, I think it was yesterday, and we're discussing the experiences of some people in public office, even with presidents, that even a former head of FRS during Abasha, just by asking questions, right? And we've seen it also with civilian president. Somebody says, Your Excellency, this request is not in line with this provision of the law. I don't see anybody that then say, go to hell. So you don't have to go there and say, you guys are thieves. You've stolen my money. You did not remit. Of course, if your approach is too aggressive, you lose your job. But if you are polite and you are wise about it, in some cases also you can also discuss it within yourselves.
Yeah.
So we're a company of 10 staff. I noticed they haven't remitted my tax. I'll ask the other people, do you check your tax account whether they remitted? I want to see whether it's your problem alone, whether it's general one. So when you now go to HR, we observe this. Is there something that you need to take a look at? So I don't think anybody will fire you for asking those questions.
Okay. And lastly, as we begin to close up for the moment, we hear, okay, so you're taxing companies, and I know you're trying to put up this automated system where every, for example, let's say importer account for every item that is imported. How that will be implemented is still something I'm waiting to see, because even at our ports, there have been many reports of people under declaring what has been imported. So how are you going to trail them to know that this is what you imported, this is the number you sold, where even between the owner of the business and the salesman, the salesman will sell, buy another one to replace, and he doesn't know. So how would you, who are so far away,
Be able to monitor all, the sales in that.
Interesting question. To be honest, there is no problem that we have that is unique to us. So there are countries that have been dealing with some of these things for years and they figured it out. So one of the things we've done under this new law is to design it to punish you when you are evading taxes and you are dishonest, and to make your life easy when you are honest and you do the right thing. It was the other way around before under the old regime. So to answer that question, let's say I import mobile phones. Option one, I just smuggle it in. I don't want to pay any duty. I pay bribes, smuggle the stuff, and so government doesn't know. They did not collect import duties. I'm cool until you now realize that under the new system, it says if you haven't paid the correct amount of import duties, the cost of this whole mobile phone is disallowed for corporate tax purposes. So that's up to about 40% of your profit is the implication.
Mm.
If you need to pay import duties of 20% and you evade it by smuggling the item and you lose 40% from tax deduction, you do the math. You don't need anybody to appeal to your conscience. If you say, well, what's my business? I'll sell the phone without them knowing. We've designed this system so that the person that buys for you, we just need one person who buys the phone from you and it's for business. So they want to claim a deduction for it. So when they put it in their tax returns that we have this laptop, this mobile phone, this car that we bought for business, and we need to claim tax deduction for it, the system will say, well, we can't find who sold it. It triggers a tax audit. So in a nutshell, the new system we have developed or that we are developing, because it's not fully built, it takes time, would make sure that if you are the one who is under declaring, because if you did not smuggle it and you bought the phone for 1 million per unit and you declare it as 100,000 naira so that you can pay less import duties, no problem. From the corporate tax, the cost of this your phone is also 100,000 naira. So what that means is, you won't sell it for 100,000. When you sell it for 1.5 million. But you declare 100,000 when you brought it in. Government will say your profit is so much. You made 1.4 million naira profit. They'll tax you on that 1.4 million.
Mm. Okay.
So we think that it's not a perfect system, but it's progress from where we used to be.
Mm. All right. So that even answers partly my question, which is to say those who are inflating prices, how does the tax address it? But this already shows how it is
Yes.
addressed. But there's an elephant in the room that Nigerians keep asking questions about, and it's important we ask you for clarity on that. What is so unique about France that we're getting them engaged in our tax processes? What have they done that we couldn't have got from, let's even say you want to be a very Pan-African, we couldn't have got from Rwanda. I heard you speak about Rwanda,
Yeah.
so gloriously. We couldn't have got from South Africa. We couldn't have got from any other country, from Belgium, America. Okay, we want to leave America and go to UK. Anyway, why France?
Thank you for asking. This is also one of the areas where I feel like the elites are failing us. Because they're always the ones that will create these narratives. I'll tell you what the story is. When we started this reform, going to almost 3 years now, I say 2.5 years, one of the things we wanted to do was to study the rest of the world. You cannot say your system is not working and you want to fix it and you just stay with yourself, right? You'll be making mistakes of other people. Usually in Nigeria, people do, study tour, they enter plane to go to different places. Our committee is fiscal policy and tax reform, not just tax. The fiscal side of it also includes efficiency of spending. So we said to ourselves, we're not going to be traveling abroad physically. Let's connect virtually and learn from these people. So we went to ambassadors. There was a meeting we had, just one meeting, we had like 15 EU ambassadors in the room. So these ambassadors, in fairness to them, they were very, helpful. Give us the contact of your revenue authority, your finance ministry. We set up meetings online. We ask them our questions. For example, we're trying to harmonize so that instead of having 60 agencies collecting taxes at the federal level, we have one. UK had done it since forever. Ghana Revenue Service, South African Revenue Service, France. Anyway, long and short of it, we spoke to many of them. I can't even count. More than 20. So once we're done with our questions and explaining what we're trying to do and what we're trying to learn from them, sometimes we then end up with requests. We'll need you to share more with us. Like, for example, one of the questions we asked HMRC UK was, when you merge custom with revenue service, what were the issues you had to deal with? We wanted to set up the Office of Tax Simplification because they used to have it in the UK. We say, okay, this office wants, because this sounds nice, right? You have an office where they're just trying to simplify the tax system. We wanted to set it up, but the UK was the example we wanted. And then we then asked them, how did you set it up? Why did you set it up? What has been your experience? When we had this conversation with France, we were blown away with what they have done. They're the most effective in the OECD, developed world, in collecting taxes. They collect 44% of GDP. Everything is harmonized. They have an agency they call DigiFip, is the acronym for a long. They have 90,000 staff.
90,000.
FRS, now NRS, has 12,000. All the states combined have less than 10,000. So just to give you an idea, their budget is 8 billion euros for running the organization, and they collect more than 1 trillion euros for the country. So when we finished our engagement with them, they were even proposing that we should come over to do the learning. We said, no, but anything we want to ask, we can ask you. You know what they did? They actually came. They sent 5 people to come to Nigeria. So when they came to Nigeria, we said to them, see, all that we're asking you to do, our committee is temporary. We need that capacity, that knowledge in the institutions. So we involved the FRS. So when we were done with the engagement and our requests, we sent a request by email, and France said, let's document it so that we're clear about what you're asking us to do and what we can do, what role you need to play. For example, one of the items in the MOU is that should you change your mind that you want to come to France, you pay your flight, we'll give you the meeting room. So they're just basic stuff. It was just France, sometimes Nigerians will say over syllabus. They were the ones who decided to put it in a document and say, let us sign. Other people just agree with us by email. So Rwanda, for example, we had engagement with them. We had with a number of African countries. So it wasn't so when they signed the MOU to say this is what you request from us and this is what we can do. I think there was even one request that one director of FRS included to say, we don't mind learning French because we are surrounded by French countries. There's ECOWAS. We want to expand our influence. Of course, France was very happy to say they want to learn our language. Do you get? So when they signed the MOU, next thing, there's a group that I have for some elites on WhatsApp. Somebody just said they have signed away our data security, this sovereignty, that. I said, God, it would have been better if that person said maybe. There was no maybe. You think the guy was the one that drafted it, and everybody just copied it before we knew it. Data sovereignty, this SSC. To be honest, there are two things in conclusion, in my view. When you see some French people and you see some Nigerian people, and they sign an agreement and they call it an MOU for capacity development, exchange of knowledge and experience, and you say these Nigerian people will give access to the data to the French, there are two things. Either you are saying they have been compromised. Nobody said they were compromised. The other one is there's inferiority complex. Why is it that nobody, not one person, said maybe in this arrangement, French will open up their data so we can learn how they did it? That's a possibility, right? But in their mind, unconsciously, the French people are too smart to do such stupid thing. But these are our Nigerian people. We don't trust them. They can be so stupid that they will open up the data of their citizens to France so that they can learn how France was doing tax harmonization. Is ridiculous. In the tax law, there are provisions about confidentiality. If the taxman gives your data, even within Nigeria, outside of the court order or for tax purposes, they'll go to jail. There's an international protocol for exchange of information that Nigeria signed up to, involving more than 100 countries. So we're not that stupid.
Okay. So you're saying that the MOU now has nothing to do with data exchange. The details is training.
Why would they even do data exchange? My point is, why would anybody give data to France to do what?
But how did this talk about data exchange come up?
It is because people like to create misinformation so they can trend. Somebody just cooked it up. In fact, I saw one where they said they have signed secretly. The day the thing was signed, FRS themselves put it on online on their social. You can go and find their social media account. If they were signing in secret, why would they put it there?
There's another question, which is, or worry of Nigerians, is that it was influenced by the president.
The president was, in fact, the president will be hearing it in the news the way everybody was hearing it. He doesn't even have time for that. He gave us the job to go and do tax reform. Anytime we have the opportunity to sit down to brief him, it's going to be big issues, not the fact that we're trying to learn. So we'll go and tell the president we're trying to learn from Rwanda, we're trying to learn from Ghana, UK, France, US, Italy, Germany. How is that his business?
Okay,
So the president had zero role. The president was not aware of it. I would admit the fact that France sent people to come to Nigeria could have been influenced by the relationship between the two presidents. Do you get? Because it costs them money to come here. They spend like 1 week. So you feel like if it's someone you love, you want to go out of your way to help them. But it wasn't like we asked the president to say anything. No.
But is France the only country that you're having such interactions with?
No. We're having such interactions with more than 20 countries. France is the only one that says, let us write it in a memorandum. A memorandum of understanding is that let's understand ourselves. You know, I can send you a message on WhatsApp and it's an MOU. It says that anytime I'm in Lagos, you help me find accommodation. When you come to Abuja, me too, I'll find it for you. That's an MOU.
All right, so finally, the tax law is being implemented, and what do we expect to see over the next 1 year, the first 1 year of implementation? What are the changes of the impact we should expect?
Some of it we already seen. From January, for example, a lot of people, bottom 97% of workers see either complete removal of their PAYE tax. We had a very engaging session with ASU, and the professors were confirming. One of them said his salary had increased by 26,000 naira in just January alone. To the rich people, 26,000 naira is small. To a teacher, that's a lot of money. We've seen that already. For small businesses, there's the intention in the tax reform to encourage formalization because we have this large informal sector. And if you are informal, your ability to grow is constrained. You're not organized, you don't keep record, no governance. So we designed this tax law to encourage formalization. Guess what we saw? The Registrar General of the Corporate Affairs Commission reached out and said they want to come and meet with us. He said, whatever it is you've done in your tax law, they were receiving between 5,000 to 10,000 applications every single day for informal sectors that want to register their businesses. So they couldn't cope. That was why he came to talk to us. I said, let's find a way to cope. I was happy when I heard them say about last week or 2 weeks ago that they've now created a technology platform with some AI, and you can now register in a few minutes, and they're accommodating those people. That's progress. Before the reforms, all of the tax authorities in Nigeria had less than 10 million active taxpayers in a country of over 200 million. Workforce is over 80 million. Under this new tax law, the old law says you should apply to get a tax ID. The new law says if you're an adult, you have taxable income, or you have anything that shows that you should be a taxable person, I will register you and notify you. So for your audience, for their benefit, every one of them who is an adult, who has a BVN or has NIN has been registered. They have a tax ID.
They don't know about it.
Whether they know about it or not, they have been registered. If they want to know, they should go and retrieve it. So they should go to the website of the Joint Revenue Board. I don't have the exact address. When you get to the address, it asks for your name and your NIN. You put it in, it tells you what your number is. So as I speak to you now, we have over 100 million people have been registered for tax from less than 10 million.
And for those who have been registered right now, It means that they're expected to pay tax.
No, I'm glad that you asked that question. Being registered for tax doesn't mean you have to pay tax. It means that you are potentially someone who may have to pay tax. For example, you are registered for tax, you're not any more than 70 or 80K per month, the law exempts you. You are registered for tax, you run your small business, the turnover is 80 million a year, you don't pay tax. But you know what? By being registered for tax, you now have your data that government can use for economic planning. You know, during COVID-19, there were many countries where they didn't look for who was poor. They went to the database of tax record because that's the most reliable database any country can have, right? If you want to help farmers, you shouldn't be going to villages and be looking for farmers. You go into the system. Because as a taxpayer, you also register what you do, where you live, your phone number is there. If government wants to give you credit, they just credit your bank account or give you food stamp on your mobile phone, which is in the system. If government wants to give tractor to farmers, you go to the system. You will see the farmers in a particular local government with record. This is not the one that somebody that is a politician in Abuja suddenly becomes a farmer to collect a tractor. So this thing about the tax system and record goes far beyond collecting revenue. But it also helps to collect revenue because if you're a rich person and I have you in the system, even if you lie, I'll find out. And I'll ask you to pay your tax because you are being unfair by making money and not paying taxes. A lot of the content creators are fighting the reform. One of them admitted to making more than $10,000 every month. Never paid tax before. They need to pay.
All right. The conversation around taxes never ends, but I want to say thank you for your time with us today. The chairman of the Tax Policy and Fiscal Tax Reform and Fiscal Policy Committee, Taiwo Oyedele. Thank you for your time today.
You're most welcome.
That's how we wrap up the edition of A Trip to the Capital. It's all tax. You have your tax number. Well, on the right there at the bottom of the screen, you see the tax, the website there. Go check out your tax ID and make sure you declare properly so that I know will not happen to you. My name is Olu Akarede. Keep listening to Lagos Talk 91.3 FM and do not leave our social media handles on YouTube, Facebook, and all other platforms. That is Lagos Talks 913. Spread the news. Let's be good citizens. See you next week.